Hi, my name's Corey. I'm going to do a quick little tutorial on how to make mead. It's pretty easy, simple process. I've had a lot of years of experience. I've won quite a few medals and ribbons and whatnot. I've had several people ask me how I actually do it. I find that most people find brewing as being a scary kind of thing, and I'm just trying to help take that away with all the other guys out there with their videos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with showing you how I make my mead. It's considered a show mead or sack mead. It's basically just honey, water, and yeast. What I have here is about 13 pounds of honey. It actually is 8 24-ounce bears. I've got them from a local honey farm. They find it's best to get your honey locally. That way you can make sure that it hasn't been processed. It goes under very low filtration. I'm the type of guy that if there's bug parts in my honey, I'm happy because it tells me they haven't done anything weird to it. A lot of the honey that you can get off the market or off the shelf at the store or whatnot usually has some of the high fructose corn syrups in it or other weird things that you don't necessarily want. They'll sometimes get watered down, and that can actually mess up your honey. Basically, a honey has got too much water in it to start fermenting on its own, or it will then no longer be kind of a safe honey for doing this. You'll have to sterilize it. Anyway, so I've got my 13 pounds of honey. I've got my water. I've got my yeast. I've got my fermenting bucket. So what I'll do is I'll start by putting in all my honey. I've got a warm bucket right here next to me, so you'll see me throw these on the ground, and I'm not really throwing them on the ground, I'm throwing them in a bucket so that I can get that last little bit of honey out. Anyway, it's an empty bucket, there's nothing in here. Mead shouldn't take you too long to make. I've actually taught quite a few people how to brew, how to make mead right here in this workshop of mine, which is known by everybody else as my garage. But I do a lot of fun work here. Anyway. There's a couple good books out there that I like to use. They've taught me a lot, they've helped me a lot, I've researched a lot, and I've figured out a lot on my own. But if you're just getting started, there's one book here called The Complete Mead Maker by Ken Tran. It's a really great one. Teaches you a lot of really great concepts of honey, how it works, what to expect out of the different varieties. Every variety does something different. It has a different flavor. The colors mean different things. It's a really great book. I also have Charlie's The Complete Joy of Home Brewing. Now this one has a little section on mead. It's not really earth-shattering. However, it's got a lot of great fundamentals when it comes down to actually brewing and the whole process. So those are two books I suggest if you want to get into it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a 5-gallon batch, or roughly that. It's basically going to determine on my gravity on what that comes out as. And I'll go over all that as we go through this. I like to keep my tools very simple when it comes to making mead. Like I said, I like to keep it all pretty simple. There's no reason why it should be hard. As I tell everybody when I teach them how to brew or make mead, basically, if the general concept is this was supposed to have accidentally happened in nature, then by my getting involved, I can't screw it up too much. Go ahead and pull all these off. So things to look for when you're getting honey. You want your honey to be as little processed as you can possibly get, like I mentioned earlier. You're looking for stuff that has really not gone under heat. It hasn't been stressed. It's as natural, as unfiltered as you can get. Generally, it's kind of hard. This honey farm that I get mine from, I actually used to have a friend that was a beekeeper, and I used to get a lot of my honey from him, and it would actually show up with wax and bee parts in it and everything. But they only put a little bit of heat on their honey, just enough to be able to get it to flow a little bit better. What I find is that honey is extremely delicate. If you want your mead to actually taste like honey when you're done, you really want to touch it as little as you absolutely have to. Don't heat it up too much. There's a school of thought out there that when you make mead, you really need to boil it first. And every honey that you boil is going to come up with this scum on top. That scum is all the impurities and whatnot that you shouldn't have in it. And there's the belief that your honey it could get you sick. So basically what my thought is if I heat it up too much, I'm going to take away all those delicate flavors. I'll just boil them right out of the mead, and I'll be left with sugar water, which will then ferment into alcohol, and it'll taste more alcoholic, more like rubbing alcohol than it will mead. Now, granted, it doesn't get that bad, but I'm actually the type that's looking for those very, very fine notes in my meads. So anyway, I don't boil mine. You'll see I don't have any heat source out here. I guess you probably couldn't tell even if I did. But I don't. I just do this. Take my honey, put it in the bucket, I put in my water, I measure for my gravity. Specific gravity is the measurement of how much sugar is in your liquid. Brewers, winemakers all call it different things. Winemakers will call it your must. The brewers will call it your wort. But I've got background in both, so I kind of mix my techniques a little bit. But I've never actually had somebody tell me that my meat isn't worth some kind of medal or ribbon or something like that, or at least not the ones I give them. So what I have is I have my bucket, I have my water, I have my 13 pounds of honey. Now, granted, in today's market, that gets really expensive, and I did spend $70 to make this, which this mead used to be cheap, but now that we've got issues with honey and bees, it's becoming more and more difficult to get it. Well, it's not difficult to get, it's just more expensive, and it's really not a cost-effective way to make alcohol for home brewing. But there are those of us who love honey and would rather spend the extra money. You're careful it won't become a sticky mess, but I've already not been careful enough. Honey on its own is a natural astringent, so it will fight bacteria all on its own. That was what I was trying to get at earlier with regard to whether you boil it or not. So if you allow too much water in your honey, or you get honey that's had too much water in it, you have the chance of picking up bacteria. Where this, what I'm doing, the raw honey will actually not have any, it doesn't have any bacteria in it to pass along. At least not that the yeast won't take care of. And the fermentation process, basically. So as a little bit of a history or assumption lesson, is that mead was started with early people basically out scavenging, hunting back in the old days, where they would carry water with them, say like in some kind of water bag, and then they would take they originally found the honey, got excited about it because it tasted sweet, and put some in their water bag. Well, basically the mix of their saliva with the honey and the water in there caused it to ferment. And of course, they didn't seem to understand what all that meant, so they kept drinking it anyway. And they found later on that it would give them a buzz. It's kind of some fun thought. I don't know how it started. I'm not going to begin to guess, but if that's what they want to say, that works by me. All I know is it's really stinking old. And I like to believe that mead came before beer. Although a lot of people will fight with me on that one. All right, we're getting there. This is the biggest part, is just trying to get all the honey into the bucket. I like to leave a little bit in every jar because my wife likes it a lot. That way she's got something to come through later and put in her tea and things like that. But just about there. I got this one and one more after it. Oh, one thing also is only use honey you like the taste of. I know a lot of people that have tried to make mead out of honey they didn't really like because it was cheap, and that's usually their first mistake. And I really like this honey. I'd tell you what it is, but it doesn't really matter. Well, I guess if it doesn't matter, I'll tell you anyway. It's a New Mexican honey from Hayes Honey Apple Farm. It is their New Mexico blend. Yeah. Anyway, it's really good. It's really sweet. It's got a lot of floral. Of course, I mean, this is all typical, but I've had some honeys that taste like pepper. I've had some that taste like weeds. I've had all different kinds of stuff. Basically, pollen, if you smell it, that's generally how your honey's going to taste, is that smell you get off the plant. This one is New Mexican local. So, all right. Well, here I've got my 13 pounds of honey, and on my fermenter, that is marking off about a gallon. It's about a gallon of honey, and that's not cheap, but it's worth it. All right, so what I'll do next is I've got a jug of water here. I don't know if you can even read that or not, but it doesn't look like it. What I'm going to do is I'm planning on making 5 gallons, which is right about here. My honey is right about here at the moment. You can kind of see it that way a little bit better. I'm sure you can see it a little better that way. I'm going to go ahead and put in some of my water, and then I'm going to start measuring the specific gravity. Specific gravity, like I mentioned before, is basically how much sugar concentration you have in a solution. So it'll tell you a general idea of what your expected alcohol content would be. What you do is you take a reading again after everything's all fermented out, and you take that delta, the difference between the two numbers, and that will tell you what your actual alcohol is for it. Honey, not all the sugars in honey are fermentable. So you will have a residual sweetness, which is basically, it will be sweet when you're done, unless you're using, like I said, a store-bought honey like at a grocery store and it's got a lot of high fructose in it. All that will ferment out. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and fill this up. I'm looking for a gravity of 1.080 at a minimum. I would like something higher, which basically means I need to add less water. So I'm not going to take it all the way up to 5 gallons. I'll probably take it to about 4 to start. My general rule of thumb is 3 pounds of honey for every gallon of water. So I think I'll probably be good in the 3.5, 4 gallon range, so that I can start measuring my gravity on that. I don't actually have one of the spectrometers that shows me what my sugar content of the honey is. Just haven't cared to buy one. Alright, there we go. That is now 3.5 gallons. You can see the line right here. Now what I have what's called a whip. It's a nice long little plastic whip, with a crook on the end of it, and you connect it to your drill. It spins real nice. So basically the idea with making mead and getting fermentations to start with beer, with wine, you like to get a lot of oxygen in there to start. So this is absolutely fine. You hear about people making alcohol and they basically say, be careful how much oxygen you get in, it'll oxidize, it'll screw it up. Well, in the very beginning, this is when all the yeast actually builds its colonies. It doesn't start fermenting until it actually depletes all the oxygen. So the more oxygen it has, the bigger the colony will get, the stronger the fermentation you'll have. Once, like I said, once the oxygen goes away, then it will switch over and it'll start fermenting. So it's kind of fun, kind of dangerous, but still, it's fun. With this process, you got to make sure everything stays clean. Something I've gone through and I've done with all of my equipment is I've washed it real good. I've used an oxygen-based cleanser. It's from Craftmasters. And then I also went through with what's basically a sulfur solution, and I use that to sterilize. So everything's been sprayed down, everything's been clean. I have to maintain keeping everything clean here. Anything I take off this table, I've already sprayed down real good. It's laying on a towel so that I don't have a problem. So because we're doing a no heat method, you have to make sure everything stays absolutely clean the entire time. Never ever use bleach. Bleach carries residual chlorines. Those chlorines will then go in and kill anything. Even when you try to ferment, it'll kill your yeast. So don't ever use chlorine. Get something from a brew supply. If you absolutely must use chlorine, you have no access to anything else, You can use it very, very light, very diluted, and let it wait at least 24 hours before you use that equipment so that the chlorine has an opportunity to at least dissolve off to an extent. Okay, so this right here is called a wine thief. Basically, it's a nice tube, and it's got a little locking valve on the end of it. Once this, I'll put it down into the solution, this will go in, it'll fill up with liquid, and then when I lift it out, this little lock will then, the valve will close, will hold the solution in it. I'll be able to take a reading off my, my hydrometer. This right here is my hydrometer. Basically, it'll float. I like to use it inside my wine thief, and there's a bunch of numbers, and it'll tell you exactly what your gravity is. So you just saw me mess with the suck on it a little bit. I do that. There's nothing wrong with it as long as I don't get any of my germs on it. I usually put my hand over it and suck against my hand as opposed to the instrument itself. So as you can see here, I have a good way to show you it. It's got all the bubbles on it. Anyway, so my hydrometer's floating in there right now. It's giving me a number of 1.112. So what that means to me is it means I can add more water, which basically is going to take the alcohol content of the solution down. But at the same time, it's not bad because it just gives me more. I'm going to empty that out. I'm going to lay it on my lid. Go ahead and go on up to 4 1/4 gallons. And now I'm letting it fill up into the wine thief again. There, it's all starting to rise now. This is giving me a number. Where's it? It has me at 1.94. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more water in here. I'm going to go ahead and take it to 4 1/2. Well, 4 3/4. That will probably have me right about where I'm going to finish. I got to make sure to drain it because then that lower water content mead is still inside there, and it'll throw off my reading. .084. All right. Basically, this at this time tells me I'm done. What I'm going to do is basically add some yeast nutrient. This yeast nutrient for me, it comes in crystalline form. It's a blend of some different stuff. Generally, there's nitrogen and whatnot in it. I'm not real clear on exactly what's in it, other than it really helps the yeast go. Honey, the real pale, real clear honeys don't have enough nutrients in them for a good, healthy fermentation. So what we do is we add yeast nutrient. Now your very dark, very heavy, very thick honeys, those have a lot more nutrient in them, and you may not always need to put any nutrient in them. What I do is, just for cause, I go through and I add nutrient to everything. I'll add 2 teaspoons of nutrient, and that'll be enough so that my my yeast get a good start. So there's my 2 teaspoons of yeast nutrient. I'm going to stir it up a little bit. Use my wine thief for a lot of stuff because basically I don't have to dirty up a lot of extra equipment. I mean, you don't have to use a wine thief. I like to. Makes life easier for me. You don't have to use a whip. You can just use a giant spoon if you've got one. Stainless steel is the best. Wood isn't really all that great, not unless you use it solely for making beer or brewing. The reason why I say that, the Vikings used to use theirs, and of course you've probably heard the story about the magic paddle, and basically that's what they used to stir up their mead. And it was known for having trapped the yeast in it. It's got residual yeast that stays on it, so basically when they put their ore in, they were actually putting the yeast in. So anyway, not that big of a deal. It's pretty easy to deduce that if yeast will stick to it, any other kind of crud can stick to it, like spaghetti sauce and whatnot, and off flavors that you don't really want in there. So if you've got utensils that you're going to use, try to make sure they're stainless steel so that they're really, really good and clean. So what I did, the last thing to throw in there is my yeast. I used the Loveland EC 118 or 1118. It ferments clean. It's usually got about a 18% alcohol content to it, or alcohol potential. It means it can ferment this all the way up to 18% if I have that much sugar in there. What I do is I create a starter. I don't know how well you can see that, but anyway, it's all nice and milky here, and then it's got this really nice head on it. Basically, I add a little bit of honey to some water that's about 100 degrees, and then I throw my yeast in there. It kicks it off real nice. I know I'm going to get a good fermentation off this. So it's had a chance to start. A lot of people say bad things about dry yeasts, but I've never had one not work for me, and they've always worked very, very well. So, cheers. Okay, so what I have is I have this food grade bucket. It is a brewer's bucket. It doesn't have to be a brewer's bucket, but you do want to make sure that it is food grade. If it's not food grade, then you can get all the funky chemicals leaching into your alcohol when you're trying to make it. So just make sure it's a food grade bucket. You need a good, nice, tight seal. I keep to the brewer's method of doing my fermentations when I do mead. I don't do open fermentations. I use closed fermentations. I believe it keeps it cleaner, allows it to ferment a little bit better. That's what I do with my meads. Now, if I was doing a nice wine or something like that, or I went and harvested my own grapes, absolutely I'd do an open fermentation. Maybe on a good wheat beer I might do an open fermentation. But for the most part, on my meads, I always do a closed fermentation. This has got an interlocking seal to it, so basically as you put it on, you'll hear it click like that. Let you know it's good and sealed in there. It's nice and airtight. That's part of it being a closed fermentation. Now that this is done, then I use what's called an airlock. There's lots of them that are made. This is my cheap one. It's just what I had available at the moment. You'll fill it with liquid. This right here, so I always keep a spray bottle of my sulfur solution. It's basically I put 1 or 2 Camden tablets in here, C-A-M-P-D-E-N, Campden. And it's got a low sulfur content. A lot of brewers use iodine or iodophor. This is one of the things I keep with the winemaking method. And I'll put some of this in here. Basically what's going to happen is this liquid is going to have all the CO2 from the fermentation pass through it. Now a nice high CO2 warm solution is going to be great for breeding stuff. So that's why I put something in there that's going to kill it. Sometimes for fun I'll put a little hard alcohol in there just because it does the same thing, but I'm not going to do that today. So what will happen is as the container itself, you want that nice airlock. The CO2 will be produced by the yeast. It'll push up through here, and then it'll make this bubble. So it'll push this volume down, and it'll cause it to bubble, and then the CO2 itself will vent off. The whole concept of this is that you don't actually have oxygen come back through. There's no way to create a higher pressure out here so that it'll suck up air unless you pick up your jug and it bends and stuff. But anyway, the idea is we've aerated it really, really nice right now. I do not want any more air going in there. All I want us to do is to bleed off the CO2. So the way the yeasts work is they will go in there, they will hunt for the sugar, they will consume the sugar. They have two byproducts. One is CO2 and one is alcohol. So dealing with both of them. Now, you can see what I did was I've got a little hole, because this is a special brewer's bucket, it came with a hole in it and a grommet, so all I have to do is slip it in there. Anyway, that's it. It's done. When you use your yeasts, you know, this EC 1118 has got a really large temperature range on it. Want to pay attention to your temperature ranges so that you don't actually get it into a funky range where the yeast can start producing off flavors for you. It can really screw up your alcohol. It's just a little tidbit. I mean, you can use anything. You can use baker's yeast. I've used baker's yeast in the past. It comes out all right. It's not my favorite, but there's a lot of different yeast strains. They all do something different. Just pay attention to which one you're using. But it's not necessary. You're going to end up with alcohol one way or the other. So with that being said, to make it real clear, I used 13 pounds of honey. Oh, I didn't tell you how much water I used, did I? I had a gallon, or 4 3/4. So I got 3. So, got 13 pounds of honey, 3 3/4 gallons of water, 2 teaspoons of yeast nutrient, 1 package of Loveland's EC 1118, and I ended up with an original gravity of 1.084. A gravity of 1.084 should get me in the range of 11.2% alcohol. So I don't want it that high. I would prefer it in the 10 to 11 range. It's not as stable that low. However, my mead doesn't last that long, and I like it. It's a much more drinkable product if it's sweeter. At least to my household and those who drink my mead. There are definitely those who like it absolutely dry, like a champagne, very bubbly, very dry, a little tart. There's a million different things you can do. This is one of mine. This one will be going into competition next year. Usually takes about 3 months for it to ferment out, for it to clarify, drop out, and then I like to have it in the bottle for 3 to 6 months before I get it into anything, or enter it into anything. So the concept is you're going to go from this nice big honey water solution. It's going to be very murky. Sometimes it'll even look like swamp water. But basically what will happen is the yeast goes through, it'll produce the CO2, it'll produce the alcohol, and then after a little while it'll even churn. If you're going to use this inside like a glass carboy, so something like this, you know, where you can actually see through it, you will actually see it churning inside there as it ferments. And then after a little while you start to get this cake on the bottom. It's called lees. It's dead yeast. Then it'll slowly start to clear up. What I'll do is after I've allowed mine to basically fall out, everything in it is fallen out, I'll use a product called bentonite. It's a natural clay. I'll heat that up, I'll get it in a slurry, and then I'll actually pour it into my mead and stir it up. Try not to stir it up too much, but I do stir it up. What it does is it then bonds to a lot of the junk that's still floating around in there and drops it all at the bottom. So then you end up with this really nice clear mead. From there you can then bottle it and you're all done. There's plenty of videos out there on bottling. I just wanted to spend a couple minutes to show you how I make mead. Try to break down the barrier of fear of making it. So I hope you found this to be educational and interesting. I know I'm not the best presenter, but I at least got the information out to you. You are more than welcome to email me if you have any questions. Cheers. I'd love to hear about some of the product you've created after watching this video. All right, take care. Bye.